All right, good morning, everyone. The honor of talking to you this morning about the customer experience and how we should emphasize that in delivering broadband services. And before I jump into this too far, I want to sort of define what I mean by customer experience, because it is really a loaded phrase these days. Everybody kind of has their own definition, and so I'm just going to give you mine. And I'm going to call the customer experience as everything the user sees and feels during their interactions with your company's network. So this includes not only the speed and latency, but also the setup, configuration, use, and support as problems come along the way. But also I want to try to convince you that the user experience is also going to include all of the experiences with all the new services and devices that are connected to your network. See, your network, the ones that you're building, is the foundation for that connected experience. And that comes with both opportunity, but it also comes with responsibility. So kind of the theme of this discussion over the next half hour or so is going to be, don't let the innovation that you've all created around speeds and latency and reliability of your services go to waste by ignoring the critical customer service moments. So just a little bit about, I'm Troy Cross. I've been in the telecom industry since 1993, and I've been in essentially all corners of the telecom ecosystem. Everything from a tier 1 broadband carrier in the US to international startups. And so I've kind of seen the industry from every nook and cranny from both sides of the table. And I'm coming to you today from a company called Ozmo, which you may or may not have heard of, but we have an interesting vantage point. So we're providing services around tech support for carriers. Companies like Verizon, AT&T, Google are all using the services. And we have about 25 million support interactions on our platform every day. And we have about 150,000 customer service agents using the platform every day. And they're using the platform to essentially answer questions and solve problems that your consumers are experiencing when they're using the broadband services. And so that's our primary role, but it also gives us sort of a unique vantage point where we can actually understand at a higher level, what's going well and what's not going well in terms of the customer experience. So that's what we'll dive into today. And so let's talk a little bit about the broadband market. This is, you'll probably see similar slides in other presentations, but the landscape is the global broadband market was valued at about $419 billion in 2022, estimated to reach $457 billion in the next couple of years. And this obviously this is why we're here, presents opportunity for everybody. So what are some of the factors driving this growth? Again, maybe saying the obvious, but first and foremost, and it's kind of difficult to summarize the whole industry in one slide, but just set the baseline on a couple of things I'll agree with. So one, there's both an increased demand for high speeds, and coupled with the great innovation that all of you are creating at this, for places at this conferences, so advancing PON infrastructure, Wi-Fi 7, and other technologies that are bringing better performance at the network layers. And the second thing that's going on is countries and governments are now subsidizing the proliferation of broadband services to the rest of the world. But lastly, and really it's going to be a big component of what I'm going to talk about over the remaining part of this presentation, is we're seeing an explosion of services running on the consumer's home network. So the home network is now the critical foundation for consumer electronics, entertainment, the smart home, security. And as people continue to engage in online learning, working from home, and growing their media and internet consumption, this trend is not slowing down anytime soon. So, as a byproduct of that last point, with the consumer adoption of connected services, this has driven to tremendous complexity for companies like yourself and how you're going to support the user across that journey. You see, the hard truth is we're here seeking, witnessing great progress in the industry, lots of really impressive things that are coming along the way in terms of what's next in broadband. But none of this innovation really matters at the end of the day if your users don't know how to take advantage of it. See, at the end of the day, there's there's decisions that you're making. Decisions around CPE, really important. Discussions around cloud-hosted services versus containerization, really important. And of course, AI is ever more present along the way. But at the end of the day, there's one user on a network with some new device that they purchased or some new set of services that they have high hopes for to run on that network. And if the user stumbles along the way, either using the service or getting it set up or not having problems addressed in a quick manner, none of the innovation that you've created around speed and latency matters, or at least it's much less relevant. And I think most of you would agree that this growth that we've created in the market has created a myriad of challenges for providers like you, and how are you going to deal with this expanding role that you're being asked to play for the consumer experience. And and just one of these areas is around support. It's the area that I deal with most on a day-to-day basis. And so you're going to have to decide where is your support demarcation going to be. Are you going to embrace the role of the expert? So when users come to you and ask questions that you weren't prepared for around that connected home device that you didn't sell them, are you going to be embracing that role to try to help them along the way? And are your team members trained to do that? Do they have the right tooling to do that? Is that a fair expectation of them? Or are you going to politely decline to answer that question and try to keep your support demarcation sort of at the network, if that's what you prepared to do, and politely kind of point the user towards other resources. And you can find carriers making decisions, on all sides of the spectrum. So some are embracing that role, saying, yeah, we want to be that expert in the community. Some are viewing it as a revenue opportunity, so creating what I'm terming white glove professional services for a fee that will help users along the way. And others are just trying to say, no, I want my demarcation to be where my IP connection is. And so that's my responsibility, and then that's what we'll answer questions and provide support for users. And regardless of where you land on this question, you have other considerations you're probably having to deal with. So you're likely managing remote or hybrid agents who are providing support for your customers with varying degrees of experiences, varying access to physical devices, and support tools. So you're probably trying to equip your customers with do-it-yourself installations, around your services and other services. You're trying to avoid truck rolls, of course, and you're trying to keep up with this proliferation of connected devices along the way. So you have some decisions to make. But if you want my opinion, and I'm going to assume at least some of you are going to say, yeah, my opinion is the opportunity lies with embracing the expert role, being the expert in your community, being the community CTO, as I heard someone say the other day. So if you're still interested, let's go ahead and talk about how can you prioritize support and the customer experience beyond just the speeds and fees. A couple little one point I want to make about the emphasis on broadband value. So most of your organizations are actually probably balancing a fine line when it comes to consumer value. So the good news is the cost per megabyte has come down dramatically over the last couple decades. In fact, a fun fact is it's come down 98% over the last 20 years, which is sort of an amazing stat. But the bad news with that comes with this creates margin pressure on all of you. Probably none of you are saying, oh, we have so much margin to deal with. You can really take that and invest it in other areas like customer support and this user experience. But I will say that the data does suggest that the companies in a competitive market, the companies that are emphasizing the customer experience overall are doing better than the ones that aren't. And if you're not yet convinced, here's kind of the risk to not prioritizing this in your support processes. So the vast majority of customers, 96% of them, would be willing to leave your company after just one for customer service experience. Now, that's not fair, but that's the world we live in. And depending on what the competitive nature of your particular market is, this may be a bigger issue than others. But if you're in a market where your customer has 5 choices, then this is something extremely important. So churn is a major factor.
Is this percentage for US or worldwide?
It's a good question. This particular source, I believe, is North America. Okay. So I mentioned the downsides of churn. Let's look at a couple of upsides. So beyond just avoiding churn, a couple of opportunities for you. So first, there is value in creating upsells in these new verticals. So all of the verticals I talked about earlier that are problems from the customer experience support area, the connected home, entertainment, security, all of these areas are verticals which have revenue opportunities. So if you embrace the expert for the connected home and security at the home, for example, you can start selling security services, just as an example. So whether it's on the entertainment, security, connected home, those are all areas of revenue growth if you choose to embrace it. The second is simply creating a differentiated offering for your company. And being known as the company CTO or the community CTO is something that creates differentiation and ultimately drive increased subscription to your services. Okay, so I'm going to start getting to some of the details around some recommendations for you to think about as you leave this morning. And I know this is a little bit hard to follow, but I'm going to walk you through some things, some key areas to think about as you go home and try to think about how you're going to put this to work within your organization. So the first is to concentrate on the critical moments of the initial setup. So having a working, strong, and reliable network is the foundation for the entire experience. So you need to kind of get off to a good start. You're probably doing that today, right? Most companies have put together a lot of work in creating a nice initial setup and getting the core network going. So, but if you're not doing that, that's obviously a good place to start. The second is look for opportunities to help onboard customers seamlessly as possible to value-added services like security, entertainment, and connected home. So the reality is they're going to be trying it with or without you, right? And so to the extent that you can be there along the way as they're doing it and trying to be proactive in your support will only help later on down the road. So third is proactively and continue to educate your customers on how to maximize the value of the network and services that we've created. So the way I like to think about this is help them, like if they were asked the question, either by you or by someone else, is this service providing value to you on a day-to-day basis? And what is that? Hopefully they can answer something that says, yes, it's providing value beyond just, oh, it gives me a fast connection. So, and you want to be part of that equation, and so helping them get that value along the way and be proactive will only help with you on that relationship going forward. And then lastly, I say importantly, be ready to provide support along the entire life and journey of the product and services and the connected device that they're going to be creating there. So, and this includes consistent support across every channel. We'll talk about what those channels are in just a second. So, look, I get it. This is really, really hard. This is not going to be easy for you. There's thousands of different devices and services that customers could potentially put on your network, and how can you possibly be, expected to be the expert across all of those? And the hard truth is this is only going to get worse or bigger depending on how you define it. So this is just something to think about. So this was a U.S. number, but I don't think it should be expected to be dramatically different in other parts of the world. In 2022, there were about, on average, 16 connected devices to a home network, and that was growing from 9 in 2017. Now, most of the people in this room are probably going to have way more than that on my network. And the reality is you probably do, I certainly do. But we're not normal in terms of what our consumer base is doing. So the bigger point here is the trend, right? So it's almost doubled in the last 5 years, and you can expect that trend to continue. Right? So this is going to create a lot of pressure for you in terms of how do I support all these different random devices that customers are putting on my network? But you really have two choices. So one, you can ignore where the market's going and just try to set your business apart based upon your kind of network reliability, speed, and latency. Or you can embrace the challenge and simply do a better job than your competitors. Really, that to me is the bar. You just got to you're not going to be perfect at it. You can't expect you and your team can't be expected to know everything. But what you can try to do is be better than your competitors. Okay, so let me give you a couple more practical examples of what this could look like in an organization. And I'm not here to get a product pitch, and I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to try to give you some places to think about. So by far the most important, and you're going to see why here in just a second, is creating some sort of foundation of answers within your organization. Now, this could be as simple as, internally created knowledge-based articles. So, and there's lots of you who are probably doing stuff like that. And that's valid, right? And those can be used. The question is it going to be expansive enough to help your users and your agents and the rest of your customer support staff along the way? What sort of external resources are you going to be able to rely on that are, 1, trustworthy, 2, kept up to date, and 3, accessible? But you need to create a story and strategy around what is that foundation of answers going to be. And then once you do that, then that allows you to set up channels for your organization. It falls into this category of self-serve. So it's really a subset of kind of self-serve troubleshooting. But I don't want to ignore the impact that AI is about to have in this area. You see, as recently as last year, about 14 months ago, the biggest challenge for self-serve style chatbots and other interfaces like that was its inability to recognize really complex natural language. And at this point, probably everybody in the room is played around and are using new services like ChatGPT. And you now understand that this is not the problem anymore, right? Large language models can now understand with precision what users are really asking for. Now the challenge right now, and will remain for the near future, is all right, now that you understand what they're asking for, can you surface a reliable and accurate answer every time? And from that, I'll just say refer back to point one, which is having a reliable source of answers. All right, so what does some examples might look like? So let's look at about the agent channel. So this is an example of the sort of things that you would need to have in place if you were going to start providing support across things beyond just the modems and routers that you're shipping to your customers. So this is just an example of a Euro router that the customer happened to buy off of Amazon, and now they're calling in saying, hey, I need help setting this thing up, or it's not working, or I can't get my Roku device to connect to it. Who knows what it could be. So having some sort of tooling in place, if you're going to allow your agents to answer questions like that, is going to be super important. And it's an example of what that tooling might look like. And then here, I took a screenshot of this. This is Rogers in Canada. I thought they did a really good job of, on their website, creating this self-serve experience, which guides users down, hey, if you have problems or questions in this particular category, click here and we'll try to help you along the way. And you can see they're trying to cover a large area of devices and services that might show up at home. Everything from, of course, their modems and routers, but also streaming devices and security devices and so forth. So I thought this was a good example of things that you can put in place simply on your website. And then lastly, here's an example of what's possible in the world of AI chatbots now. And like I said before, this is a technology that's allowed systems to now precisely understand exactly what users are saying. In many ways, better than agents. Agents can sometimes, not have the technical capabilities to really understand what the user's saying, especially if the user's gone down 20 minutes of troubleshooting on their own. They're kind of frustrated and they're really wanting to get specific. Large language models can do a really good job of understanding what the user's saying, but I would want to have a big caution for you, is at least today, and I would say, for the next 18 months, I would be very cautious about relying on off-the-shelf large language models to provide the definitive answer, right? Because they will hallucinate and they'll confidently guide your customer to the wrong area. But if you use them to understand what the user's saying and then pivot to providing them answers that are reliable, that's the right model. And I will say that it's to me personally, it seems clear that this will be, it's not there yet, but this will become the default for consumers. Once they start understanding, hey, I know I can go to this chat experience and I'm going to have an efficient, effective, and meaningful conversation with this chat service that's going to ultimately give me answers. This will be the go-to. They'll start doing this instead of calling you. And so you just have to make sure that you have the infrastructure in place to handle that well. And this is one of those rare opportunities where, as we say in the US, you can have your cake and eat it too, right? Because consumers will be demanding this sort of interaction and interface from you over time. Your competitors will be doing it. They're going to start expecting it. So that's good. That's an opportunity for you. And it's also, this will drive down costs in your organization. So it's the one thing you can force your customers are going to drive you to that's actually going to reduce your overall expense and liabilities. And I've already talked about the cost of not doing these things well, so I won't spend too much more time on that. But it's an opportunity both to delight users and save money. This is rare opportunities. Okay, so I'm going to kind of wrap this up. I'll just say that competing, if I haven't made the point already, competing on fastest speeds and lowest prices is not a long-term winning strategy in my opinion. It's a race to the bottom with marginal improvement. It's not creating differentiated value. And I will say that this really starts with a company mission. So if your organization isn't embracing this as a priority, I would start there, right? And see what you need to do with your organization to get alignment on around making sure you're doing these sort of things well. Because if you do it well, it's going to drive immediate and long-term value in differentiating business, improving customer satisfaction, and ultimately expanding your customer base. And if you agree with the premise, but you're not sure where to start, and you can always reach out to me. I can kind of point you in different directions. And by the way, I know there's a lot of engineers and network architects here, product managers, and I'll just say this is really important for you as well. So don't just rely on the fact, well, this is something that's an issue for the customer service teams. I would go back to your organization and figure out, is this something that we're doing well? If not, then talk to your organization about what you can do to help. And at the end of the day, not only are you need to do this for the benefit of your company, but like I said in the beginning, don't let all the work that you've done go to waste by missing out on that customer experience opportunity, opportunities that arise. All right, so that's it. You can reach me here, troy.cross@ozmo.com, LinkedIn, and thanks for your time today.
All right, any questions right out of the gate before I get started, because I'm very passionate about this. So we talked a little bit about this yesterday, right? When we were doing the device management roundtable, and I didn't get a chance to bring up the stats, but as I said yesterday, one of the results of the survey we did had some, or not from the survey they did, but their report had some additional information from customer surveys that they've done, consumer surveys. And when they asked what was important, it was all of this stuff. And cost was like 50. And so my first question is, you mentioned that the people who are getting the most benefit out of this are the ones who are embracing the role versus doing it as like an upsell, right? Do you have any more insight into how that's working, whether that's working? Like, ultimately, are there operators that are experiencing the fact that they can charge more in general for a better experience, and people are willing to do it because they get a better customer experience?
Yes, I'm going to caveat what I said. Have I seen data that says if we do this well, we can charge $5 more per month per user? I haven't seen that data. But what we have seen is companies that are doing this well are seeing less churn, right? And so, and companies who are churning less, tend to have more flexibility on what they can charge for their services. So I think the answer is yes, but it's implicit, right in the equation, not explicit, at least from the data we've seen.
Right.
Yeah.
I have more if anybody. The other thing that has come up a lot is, the operator's role in general, and their operator's role as a brand in terms of being invisible versus being able to show what you're doing for the customer, right? And kind of going back and forth between, all of the stuff that we're able to provide with the standards that we make in terms of data for the operation to do stuff, and then matching that up with AI and solving problems before they even happen. Is stuff like this a way that operators can sort of be like, hey, look, I've been here the whole time making sure that you do have a great experience, even when things aren't going wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key to me in this is, I don't know if you should try to be invisible anymore, right? Because you, if possible, you want to be seen as your company is providing value to the consumer. They view you as a partner in their connected home experience. like all this is provided by you. So as they walk around their home, as they're using the services, if they can think of you as the provider that are providing, either providing that directly to them, or at least being support channel to help them along the way, then I think that's the place you want to be, not just the reliable, sometimes invisible network provider. It's a change in paradigm for sure. And there's a balance, you're gonna have to find the balance. Maybe the extreme is not for your particular organization or for your community, I get that. But I think pushing along towards that direction is what I would recommend.
The other thing we talked about yesterday was management of third-party devices. And I like that you touched on that the customer's going to do this without you, right? And that's not just, it's consumer networks are consumer networks, and they have been consumer networks since internet access to the home started, right? And so, at least in the US, people sort of still view it as their job to do that and buy their own stuff and do their own thing. So yeah, it's tough. I like that you said that where are you deciding where your support line is?
Yeah, I mean, the customers are they're gonna call you, I think. I know we organizations that are getting these calls, and I'd be surprised if you're not. They're gonna call you, my Chromecast isn't working. Like, where do you? Right, and so you can say, well, that's, call Google. That's one thing you can say, or go to Google's website and see if you can find it. But are they leaving that conversation with you, understanding and being happy with that interaction?
Right.
Right, so, again, that's why I say it's not easy, it's not fair, but, if you can say, well, hey, this isn't our expertise, but I do have some stuff here that might be able to help you, and let me see what I can do. If they know that you're trying, then I think that goes a long way.
All right. Thank you very much, Sharon.